October 8th, 2009, Eufaula, Oklahoma. Early morning on the shore of a big blue lake. A man, a woman, and a 6-year-old little girl are loading up a white pickup truck. Sherilynn, Bobby, and Madyson, the Jamisons. We know they did this because their security cameras filmed them doing it. They're driving 30 miles southeast into the San Bois Mountains, pine and oak so thick that pilots call it triple canopy. Old oil roads that go nowhere. The family's looking at land up there, 40 acres. They want to leave everything behind and start over on that mountain. Now that afternoon at 2:47 p.m., somebody takes one last photograph on the family's phone. It's Madyson standing on a bluff alone. And then the phone goes silent. 9 days. A hunter is working his way through the timber near an old well pad. He owns the land out here. He doesn't live out here. Almost nobody does. That's kind of the point of this country. And that's when he sees it. A white 4-door pickup parked against the base of a bluff. It's just sitting there, still. Something's wrong. By the time deputies get up the mountain, the light's dying, flashlights come out, no signs of damage to the vehicle, no broken glass, nothing's out of place. The truck looks like the driver stepped away 5 minutes ago. They try the doors. They're all locked. And through the driver's window and the flashlight beam, the keys still hanging in the ignition. Somebody locked the truck with the keys still inside it in the middle of nowhere. Bobby's wallet is on the seat, Sherilynn's purse, maps, a GPS, and Madyson's jacket. Then something actually moves inside the cab. It's actually the family's dog. Alive, barely, too weak to bark. She's been trapped in there the whole time, over a week, and nobody came back for her. What follows are hundreds of searchers, cadaver dogs, helicopters, even a drone in 2009. They comb the mountains for the man, the woman, and that little girl, and they find nothing. The internet thinks it knows why. Witchcraft, money, a hole in the skull. I pulled the original records, the court files, the autopsy language, and almost everything you've heard about this case has a problem. Did they get lost? Did they walk into those woods on purpose? Or did somebody meet them up there? I'm John Genoa, and you're watching America's Strangest History, coming at you from the great state of Vermont. What really happened to the Jamison family? Stay with me. What happened on that mountain may boil down to what was happening inside the house. Lake Eufaula, eastern Oklahoma, biggest lake in the state, 600 miles of shoreline, and sitting right on the water, a nice house with a big yard. This is the kind of place people work their whole lives for. Now here's something notable. That beautiful blue water in the Jamisons' backyard is hiding something. 100 feet down, just east of the lake's southern arm, there's a ghost town. The original settlement, North Fork Town, they drowned when they dammed the river. So the Jamisons lived their whole lives looking out at the graveyard of a town. Kind of interesting. Bobby Jamison is 44 years old, 6'3". Sherilynn is 40. Their daughter Madyson is 6. Blonde hair, missing her front teeth. And there's a fourth member of the family you almost never hear about. Colton, Sherilynn's teenage son from her first marriage. Remember that name. Now on paper, this family made it. They got the lake house, the land, timeshares, plural, but paper lies. Start with Bobby. November 2003, he wrecks his back in a car accident. He never really recovers. Chronic pain every single day. According to the author who spent years on this case, the back pain was only part of it. Bobby fought cancer twice. He's on disability by 2009, living on strong prescription painkillers. He's a man holding life together through medication. Now for Sherilynn. Everybody agrees on one thing. She was the fire in that house. Strong-willed, sharp, protective of her kids like a mama bear. Then September 25th, 2007, her sister Marla is in Columbus, Ohio. A bee stings her on her tongue, and the bee sting ends up being fatal. Just like that, a bee sting. It's tragic. People who knew Sherilynn say that she never came back from that. Her mother, Connie, later told reporters that her daughter was bipolar and manic depressive. And after Marla died, Sherilynn started to change. She became very illogical, her mother said. One day, Sherilynn drove her to Oklahoma City, just dropped her off there on the street, told her to get out of the car. So she did. By 2009, the pressure inside that house is building from every direction. According to Colton, years down the line, the painkillers weren't just Bobby's problem anymore. His mother was taking them too, more and more. Bobby started hiding his medication. That's Colton's account, her son. Then the family starts losing pieces of itself. In June 2009, there's an emergency hearing in an Oklahoma City courtroom. It's about custody of Colton. June 23rd, temporary custody goes to his father. July 15th, full custody. It's all right there in the court record. 3 months before the family vanished, Sherilynn lost her son. And that September, Weeks before the mountain, Sherilynn checked into St. Anthony's Hospital in Oklahoma City, the psychiatric wing. Colton went to visit her there, said she seemed stable, even happy to see him. She was released September 10th, and 28 days later, she's gone. Now, around the same time, a war breaks out at the lake house with the neighbors. It starts small, stupid small. A neighbor complains that the Jamisons' cats are getting into their boats. There's an argument. And shortly after that argument, the family's cats start dying. 3 of them. Sherilynn and Colton found one of them in the morning lying motionless on the back porch. The family believed that the neighbors were poisoning them. They could never prove it, so Sherilynn fought back in her own way. There was a massive steel shipping container sitting on the property, and Sherilynn picked up a can of spray paint and wrote a message across the street-facing side. I'm going to read it to you exactly as it was written, spelling errors and all. Quote, 3 cats killed to date by people in this area. Witches don't like their black cat killed. Bois is spelled B-U-I, there is T-H-E-R-E. So we're dealing with witches that can't spell. On the door panels, there are more messages. God loves you, only God can judge. We know who you are. May God bless your soul. She wasn't hiding. She wanted them to read it. Sherilynn told her best friend her whole philosophy. If you have a problem with people, make them think you're crazy. The crazier they think you are, the more they'll leave you alone. And that container she painted, it wasn't storage. The family was planning to move into the container on the mountain land and live in it, which brings us to the spiritual war inside that house. Gary Brandon was a pastor at Eufaula, and what he told investigators made it into the case file. Bobby told his pastor that he kept seeing spirits, 2 to 4 of them standing on the roof of that house. One time, Bobby called Brandon. He wanted to know if there were special bullets he could use to shoot the spirits. And here's the timing that matters. Bobby told his pastor that he'd been seeing them as recently as October 2nd or the 3rd. Now that's days before the family drove up that mountain. He told the pastor he'd been reading the Satanic Bible looking for a remedy. Sherilynn saw them too. That's the investigative notes. 3 to 4 spirits inside the house. 2 of them were children. They had names. Michael and Emily. And little Madyson talked to them. She told her parents about Emily's sister, a spirit with wings. It's very unusual behavior, and here's the part that I find weird. Sherilynn wasn't afraid of any of it. She believed she had a gift, the power to cast demons out. She called Madyson an indigo child, a child with special spiritual abilities, a little girl who could communicate with the dead, purportedly. Now step back and look at this family from the outside, because the outside world barely saw them at all. They kept to themselves. The sheriff said that even the dog wasn't let outside. They didn't trust banks. They kept their money at home in cash. They were pulling Madyson out of school, planning to homeschool her on that mountain. A family in grief, a family in pain, a family under pressure from courts, from money, from things they believed were standing on their roof. And in the summer of 2009, they made a decision. Leave Eufaula, leave the lake, leave all of it. Buy 40 acres in the San Bois Mountains, 30 miles from anybody, drag that steel container up there, and disappear from the world on their own terms. In October, they went up to that mountain to pick out the land, and the world would never see them again. Every story the internet tells about the Jamisons has a villain in it somewhere. Witches, cults, cartels. But the first name investigators actually looked at was in the family. Bob Dean Jamison Sr., that's Bobby's father. For this guy, we got to go back to Salazar, Oklahoma. Bob grew up of one of 12 kids, dirt poor, literally picking cotton to survive. His father was brutal. Forget spankings. We're talking hammers, boards. That's the house Bob Dean Jamison came out of. And he came out swinging. Bob became a self-made man, an entrepreneur. He'd show up at the courthouse auctions and buy undervalued properties, always in cash. He'd fix them up. He'd resell them 4 to 5 times what he paid. A gas station, a tree farm, a tow truck company. And one business that kind of stands out: searchlights. Actual World War II anti-aircraft searchlights. 60-inch carbon arcs. Only 10,000 were ever made, and Bob owned some of them. He rented them out for grand openings and county fairs. They're twin beams of light that you could see for 35 miles. The kid lugging those searchlights around in a utility truck was Bobby. And the thing about this father and son pair, They were opposites. Bob was granite. Bobby, according to his cousin Dana, who grew up with him, was the sweetest, shyest kid she ever knew. Tender-hearted, cried when he got in trouble, and his father hated that. Dana remembers the day Bob put them both on a horse. She jumped right on. She rode around the pen. Bobby was trembling. He slipped off. He caught his foot on the stirrup. He fell. His father looked down at him and laughed, told his son, quote, "That girl's tougher than you are." That's the relationship for 40 years. A father who kept giving his son work, and a son who would never be what his father wanted. Now fast forward to 2008, Bob's in his 60s. He's liquidating everything. He's retiring. And according to Bobby, there was a deal in place. Bobby claimed he worked for his father's gas station for years for low pay, sometimes for no pay, because of a verbal agreement that when the station finally sold, he'd get a piece of it. Well, the station sold and Bobby got nothing. October 27th, 2008, Bob Sr. rewrites his will. Bobby is cut out of it completely. We're going to circle back to what it actually says. 5 days later, November 1st, 2008, Bob Sr. shows up at the lake house. There's a heated argument, and according to what Bobby later swore in a court petition, his father threatened to kill him and his family. When Bob drove off, Bobby stood in front of the vehicle blocking it. His father hit the gas anyway. It barely missed him. Bobby wrote that his father tried to kill him right then and there. 3 days after that, November 4th, somebody else files for a protective order against Bob Sr. Not Bobby, his mother, Starlet. Bob's wife, in the middle of divorcing him, asked the court for protection from the same man. It's right there in the McIntosh County records. 2 members of this family, 2 protective orders, 1 man. And according to Bobby's petition, it didn't stop. At a courthouse hearing in early 2009, during a bathroom break of all things, his father repeated the threat. By May 2009, the family war goes fully legal. May 1st, Bobby files his own protective order, and the language in that petition is worth mentioning here. He calls his father, quote, "a very dangerous man who thinks he is above the law." He claims his father is involved with, quote, "prostitutes, gangs, and meth." He writes that his family fears for all their lives at all times. 10 days later, May 11th, Bobby sues his father over the gas station. And May 18th, a judge hears the protective order case and throws it out. Dismissed. Now, same day, according to the case timeline, Bob Sr. and his brother Jack file a report of their own. They called DHS on Bobby and Sherilynn. Jack was at that courthouse, and years later he told an author what he said when Bobby walked in. He leaned over to the DHS worker and asked, quote, "You reckon that boy's on something?" So that's the war. Now here's a detail that ties it all together. Remember those security cameras from earlier? The ones that filmed the family's final moving? Bobby's mother, Starlet, told investigators that installing them was her idea, not because of witches or even the cats. The purpose was to protect Bobby's family from the man they jointly feared, his father. Now, in all fairness, there's a whole other side to this. Uncle Jack talked to an author on the record, and Jack's not buying any of it. He said, "I think that's a bunch of bull because she's the one that carried a gun." Jack says Bobby and Sherilynn mooched off him all the time, that Bob would give and give and give to the family, sold the tree farm, kept the searchlight business so that Bobby had work. In Jack's telling, Bob Dean Jamison wasn't a predator. He was a father who never stopped caring for his son. And law enforcement? In week 1, the undersheriff went on the record. The protective order was dismissed and it, quote, "appears unrelated." Sheriff Beecham interviewed the father himself. He said, "Nothing is leading us in that direction. We're leaving everything open. So make what you will of that." But remember, when the Jamisons drove up that mountain in October 2009, the lawsuit between father and son was still open. It was still sitting on the docket in Oklahoma City. They never settled it, and they never spoke again. Most versions of this story give you one day. The family drove up to the mountain and then they vanished. But the phone records tell us a different story. They actually went up twice. Wednesday, October 7th, 2009. The Jamisons gas up in the little town of Porham. They drive out to the San Bois, and Bobby's BlackBerry is busy that day. Bunch of calls to the out-of-state landowners selling the property, a 37-minute call to a number in Eufaula that investigators never publicly identified, 2 calls to a cell phone in Muskogee, an 11-minute call to a family from their church, and oddly enough, over and over, all day long, Bobby checking his voicemail. First impression, it doesn't feel like a man wandering out into the wilderness. It looks like a man doing business. And here's why. The family wasn't looking at one property, they were looking at a couple of 40-acre plots. 2 candidate parcels up on the same mountain. So hold on to that. We're going to circle back. promise. Around 6 p.m., they reach a stopping point. They end up talking with a neighbor up there, a man we know only as DC, for about an hour. According to DC, when that conversation wrapped up, the family decided to head home for the night and come back in the morning. Now, an author who worked the case found people close to the family who never bought that. No security footage shows the family coming home that night. No receipts, there's no hotel records, nothing places them anywhere. So officially they went home, but this is thin in the record. Either way, Thursday morning, October 8th, they gas up in Porham again, and they drive up that mountain again. 8:09 a.m., Bobby makes a phone call to a woman who lived up on that mountain. She's the real estate broker for the mountain listings. Locals call her Lady on the Mountain. The call lasts 101 minutes. That's an hour and 40 minutes on the phone with the broker for the very land that they were driving to. And here's what she later told police in a sworn affidavit. She always accompanied buyers out to their plots. That was her custom. But Bobby politely turned her down. He just wanted the coordinates. They'd find it themselves. And here's a detail from the landowners. When Bobby called about seeing the property, he didn't ask for a tour to be shown around. He asked for the GPS coordinates, just like with the broker. The seller later recalled, quote, he said he had a BlackBerry phone with GPS and that they were adventuresome and wanted to check it out for themselves. So nobody was meeting the Jamisons up there. Nobody was expecting them. It was just the three of them and Maisie alone on that mountain. 12:53 p.m., the BlackBerry takes 2 photographs, well site signs, markers for old oil pads. They're navigating, they're marking their spots. They stop to talk to DC again. That's the same neighbor from the night before. Everything about the afternoon is normal. The temperature that day at the nearest weather station hits 86 degrees. It was beautiful. It was a hot October afternoon. 1:50 p.m., the phone dials voicemail. 2:47 p.m., the BlackBerry takes one more photograph. That's Madyson standing on the bluff. And that's it. That's the last thing the Jamison family's phone ever did while anybody can say for certain that they were alive. After 2:47 p.m., silence. No outgoing calls, no answered calls. 3 people gone from the record mid-afternoon in daylight. Now, there was one man positioned to see them. The last known witness lived a quarter mile from where that truck sat. He told investigators he saw the family go up, and after that, he saw no one else go up that road, and no one else come back down. No one. One thing before we leave October 8th, the record itself isn't clean. The 2 biggest newspapers in Oklahoma reported that the family was last seen alive on October 9th by a local man. Later reporting says the last sighting was October 8th, the same day as the phone activity. And one of those dates is wrong, and 17 years later, it's still in dispute. But we can say for certain the last confirmed activity is October 8th. The last reported sighting is October 8th or 9th. Now, either way, for more than a week, nobody on Earth seems to know that 3 people and a dog are missing in the San Bois. The house on the lake sits empty with the lights on, and a white pickup truck is parked against the bluff, waiting for a hunter to find it. Saturday night, October 17th, back at the well pad, the deputies working that scene have a problem. The truck's locked. The family's gone, and it's dark. There's nothing more they can do till morning. So the truck sits there one more night. And at dawn, when the light fills that clearing, they really see it for the first time. And the first thing that strikes them is where it's parked. It's nose down on a slight incline with ridges of sludgy mud 3 feet high pressed up against both sides, the driver's side and the passenger side. It's like parking your truck somewhere that you can barely open the doors in the middle of nowhere voluntarily. It's curious. Years later, Sheriff Beecham would say that his whole theory of the case started with how the truck was parked. As to the inventory, we need to look closely because every item in this truck is a clue. Bobby's billfold, Sherilynn's purse, jackets, including Madyson's, a map, the GPS, cell phones, all of it splayed in a pile, and a life-sized Barbie doll, and something else. Years later, someone claiming to be a relative of Sherilynn from the first marriage posted this online. Sherilynn carried that purse everywhere. She'd never leave it behind. Yet, still sitting on the seat. It's curious. Sunday morning, a deputy checks the floor compartment, and everything about this case changes. Stacks of cash stuffed in a bank bag. They count it, $32,000. Beecham orders everyone away from the vehicle. The clearing gets taped off as a potential crime scene, and the sheriff, a former Army Ranger and drug officer, says, in the backwoods of southeast Oklahoma, when a sheriff finds that much money, his mind automatically goes to drugs. But play that theory out. If this was a drug deal gone wrong, the money's gone. If this was a robbery, the money's gone. The wallets, the purse, the GPS gone. But in this case, whoever or whatever took this family took nothing else. And the truck itself has something to say. Tucked into one of the cab's messy nooks, deputies found 11 handwritten notebook pages. A letter from Sherilynn to Bobby. Beecham described it as a hate letter. 11 pages of resentment, frustration, a marriage in trouble. She called him a hermit. And back at the lake house, investigators found a second letter. This one, in the words of the reporting at the time, dwelled on, quote, the spiritual realm of death. Beecham said on the record, this was, quote, a family obsessed with death. Deputies also found empty prescription painkiller bottles in that truck. Remember Bobby's back, the medication, empty bottles. And then there's what that truck didn't hold. Investigators sat down with the family that week, and relatives told them something that changed the whole picture. I mentioned Sherilynn owned a gun, a .22 caliber pistol, and she kept it on or near her at all times. Now, deputies searched that truck top to bottom. No pistol. And one more absence, perhaps the biggest one. Remember the security footage of the family loading up that morning? Investigators watched every frame, Bobby and Sherilynn making trip after trip to the truck, and Beecham noticed something about how they moved. Trance-like. They'd just stop and stare. The sheriff had a psychologist review the footage. Her analysis came back, drugs, probably methamphetamine. Beecham puts it in context. He says, we automatically assume here in southeastern Oklahoma that if you're on a drug, it's methamphetamine because we have such a problem with it. But here's the thing, no meth, no drugs, no paraphernalia, nothing like that was ever found. Nothing in the truck, nothing in the house, and the people who actually knew them never saw them use anything like that. The family's explanation was that Bobby's mother said his prescription pills made him woozy. Still curious. But back on that security footage, one detail rises above all the rest. At one point, Sherilynn walks to the truck carrying a brown leather briefcase. She loads it in. Deputies inventoried everything in that vehicle. The wallets, the cash, the letter, the doll, the dog. No briefcase. It went up that mountain with the family, and it never, ever has been seen again. Years later, Beecham said he thinks it might have held a lot of cash. And that question takes us somewhere unexpected. But first, we need to talk about the search, because 330 people are about to climb that mountain. Sunday morning, October 18th, the money's been found, the clearing's taped off, and word is spreading down the mountain, a family's missing in the San Bois. Now understand what kind of place this is. Latimer County has fewer than 11,000 people. The sheriff's department handles cattle calls and fights, and suddenly they're running the biggest operation in the county's history. They come anyway, all of them, local firefighters, forestry crews, emergency management, neighbors on four-wheelers who knew the rough country by heart. That first full day, around 50 people are on the mountain. One of the deputies working the case from day 2 is a young man named Adam Woodruff. He shows up with an abscessed tooth and stays anyway. Remember that name too. Today, Adam Woodruff is the sheriff of Latimer County, and a call goes out to a young investigator 2.5 hours away, Reed Hogan. It's his day off. He makes the drive in just over an hour. When he reaches the clearing, Sheriff Beecham walks up to him. Reed joins a canine team, a handler named Betsy, 20 years of search and rescue experience, and her golden retriever, Hazel. Here's how dog tracking works. This is significant, so listen up. Every minute, a living human body sheds about 40,000 microscopic particles. Skin, scent, it's in the form of trails that we can't see. Now, a trained dog can find a few of these particles in 1 trillion particles of air. Hazel picks up the family scent on the passenger side of the truck, and she starts moving up, away from the clearing, 500 feet towards the bluff. Halfway up the hill, the searchers see something in the dirt. Footprints, small ones, the unmistakable impression of a child's shoes, one set. Reed stared at those prints and asked a question that still doesn't have an answer today. Where were the parents' footprints? Hazel keeps climbing all the way to the top of the rocky plateau, the same bluff from Madyson's last photograph, and right there, the scent just stops. Hazel circles the plateau, agitated, searching. Nothing. It gets stranger. All day long, Hazel keeps locking onto the family's scent, then stopping, totally bewildered. But Betsy, 20 years of doing this, said she's never seen tracking conditions like it. The scent was, in her words, everywhere and nowhere at once. She said it was as though someone had taken a vial of the family's particles and sprinkled them indiscriminately across miles of mountainous terrain to confuse the dogs. Think about that. At one point, Hazel locks onto a hit and pulls them deep into the woods. When they reach the source, they're not alone. Several other dog teams have converged on that very same spot. Now, there's a rusted metal water tank there. It's 10 feet tall. It's standing in the forest like a monument. The dogs keep coming back to it over and over. So that night, in the cold rain, they open the hatch, flashlights, nothing on the surface. They drain the entire tank into the mud. It's empty. A false alarm in a search that's about to be full of them. At this point, the weather takes over the story. The rain that started the night the family vanished, it never really stopped. On the third day, it comes down so hard the only access road to the clearing washes out completely, and volunteers are literally stranded up on that mountain. The county has to haul in tons of gravel and build makeshift causeways just to get the people out. Beecham works 72 consecutive hours before taking his first nap. For the next 2 weeks, he practically lives up there. Monday, October 19th, the search is suspended, regrouping, but locals who know the terrain keep looking on their own. By October 22nd, the FBI and the OSBI arrive. That's the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations. They interview the family, friends, anybody with a connection. And that Friday, October 23rd, the big one, a full-scale assault on that mountain. Around 100 searchers, 12 dog teams, over 2 days, horses, mules, ATVs, searchers on foot in a grid. Over those weeks, the machine grows to something this county has never seen. 2 helicopters, a fixed-wing plane with heat imaging, and an unmanned drone. This is 2009. Sheriff Woodruff pointed out years later that they were using remote-controlled drones before they were popular. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children lands on that mountain on October 27th. And a legendary search outfit rides in from Texas, Texas EcuSearch, Mounted Search and Recovery. It's founded by a man named Tim Miller, whose 16-year-old daughter vanished in 1984 and was found 2 years later in what the world now calls the Texas Killing Fields. We did a video on it. Check it out if you get a chance. Miller turned his grief into a search organization that worked cases like Natalie Holloway. Now his riders were combing the San Bois on horseback. Beecham, a 31-year-old former Army Ranger, threw everything at this mountain. 12 FBI agents, 3 OSBI agents, Troop Z, private investigators, even psychics. But the mountain had a deadline. And here's a detail almost nobody outside Oklahoma knows. Saturday, October 24th, black powder deer season opens. These woods are about to fill with hunters and rifle fire. That's why Friday's push was so massive. That's why the searchers wore orange vests. They mount one more mass search on October 28th, and around October 30th, after nearly 2 weeks, the search is scaled back. The Associated Press uses harder words. Called off. Add it all up, more than 330 searchers at its peak, 16 teams of cadaver dogs across 4 separate searches, aircraft, watercraft, horseback, psychics, all of it concentrated on a search area of 10 square miles around that truck. And in 10 square miles, they found a child's footprints, a scent trail that stopped at the edge of a bluff, and nothing else. Beecham said that the family seemed to have, quote, just stepped outside their vehicle and disappeared. Made a promise on the record to keep up the search, even if it takes his remaining 3 years in office. Now hold on to that number, 10 square miles, because 4 years later, when this mountain finally gave up its secret, that number is going to come back, and it's going to hurt. 10 square miles, 330 searchers, nothing. For the internet, the math has only one answer. Something impossible happened on that mountain. I want to show you 2 documents, a weather log and a book. Together, they tell a version of the story that almost nobody tells. Start with the weather. And these aren't estimates. They're the actual readings from the Oklahoma Mesonet station in Wilburton, the closest weather station on that mountain. October 8th, the day the family walks away from their truck, the high hits 86 degrees. In her last photograph, Madyson is wearing a t-shirt. Her jacket, remember, stayed in the truck. Why wouldn't it? It's 86 degrees out, right? That night, the rain starts, over an inch before the day is done. October 9th, almost 2 more inches. More than 3 inches of rain in 36 hours on people dressed for a hot afternoon. And within 48 hours, the daytime high drops from 86 to 52. A 34-degree collapse. Overnight low sinks into the 40s and then just stays there. Night after night, everything's soaked, everything's cold. By the morning the hunter finds the truck, October 17th, the overnight low at that station reads 37.6 degrees. That's nearly freezing. Sheriff Beecham said that the creeks up there were rain swollen, though in his judgment, not strong enough to sweep away the adults. Maybe not. But hypothermia doesn't need a flood. Just wet clothes, wind, 40 degrees, that's enough. Now the book. It's called Lost Person Behavior by Robert Coaster, and in the world of search and rescue, this book is the Bible. It's built on a database of over 50,000 real missing person cases. It's sorted by category: hikers, children, hunters, where they were found, how far they traveled, who survived. Search teams all over the world plan their operations with this book, and when you run the Jamison case through it, something remarkable happens. Kester has a category he calls the despondent, people who walk into the wilderness carrying something heavier than a backpack. Grief, depression, despair. Remember the family's 2009? The lost custody battle? The psychiatric hospitalization? The lawsuits? The 11-page letter? Here's what the data says about despondent cases. 66.9% are male. The fatality rate, combining cases where no trace is ever found, is 40%, the deadliest category in the book. And for despondent subjects in temperate mountain terrain, Kester's data says 75% are found within 2 miles of their vehicle. 95% are found within 13 miles. The Jamison search box covered 10 square miles. That's roughly 2 miles in any direction from that truck. In other words, the searchers covered almost exactly the zone where 3 out of 4 despondent subjects are found. The remains, when they finally surfaced, were 2.7 miles from the truck, a straight line. It's just past the edge of the box in the band where the last 1 in 4 are found. They didn't search the wrong mountain. They stopped a half mile short. But hold on, because Kester has another category, and this one cuts the other way. Sherilynn's mother described her as bipolar, and Kester's data puts bipolar subjects in a different chapter, mental illness. And listen to what that chapter says. These subjects are almost never, quote, lost in the traditional sense. 57% of the time, they're evading. They're actively hiding. Fear of authority, fear of searchers. They hear the dogs and the helicopters, and they hide from them. They're found at the edges where 2 terrains meet. They rarely respond to rescuers calling their names, and they survive at surprisingly high rates. So, which chapter is this family in? The despondent, who walk until they drop, or the evading, who hide from the very people that are trying to save them? In this case, the data suggests both. And then there's Madyson. Kester has numbers for lost children her age too. Children 4 to 6 years old in mountain terrain, 95% are found within 2.3 miles. Madyson was found 2.7 miles, beyond the 95th percentile for a child her age. Children that age essentially never travel that far alone, which tells you something perhaps a little devastating. She almost certainly didn't wander out there by herself. The family stayed together. Now for the hardest numbers in the chapter. Survival odds for the despondent subjects in the wilderness. Past 24 hours, 43%. Past 72 hours, 19%. Past 96 hours, just 11%. The truck sat in that clearing for 9 days before anyone ever knew to look. And Kester adds a warning to his own calculations. They don't factor in the weather. Every one of those numbers assumes ordinary conditions, not 3 inches of rain or a 34-degree collapse. They don't factor in a 6-year-old in a t-shirt. So the quiet version of the story goes like this. A family walks uphill on a hot afternoon to look at their future. The rain catches them, the dark catches them, the cold finishes it. They stay together because of course they do. And they come to rest just past the edge of where anyone thought to look. Then, in November, the leaves come down. Investigators said that it was the heaviest leaf drop of the year, and it happened right after the family vanished. So a blanket of oak and pine litter settled over everything on that mountain floor, every rock, every log, everything. And that's the case for the quiet version, and it's strong. But this is why the episode doesn't end right here. The scent trail that stopped dead at the top of the bluff. A dog handler with 20 years of experience who never seen anything like it. 1 set of footprints where there should have been 3. A briefcase that went up the mountain and never came back down. And a pistol that's never been found. The weather can explain how 3 people died on that mountain. It can't explain everything they left behind. The search ends, the satellite trucks leave, and the Jamison case does what unsolved cases do in small towns. It goes quiet. By the numbers, the state of Oklahoma threw around $1 million at that mountain. More than 330 searchers at its peak, over 400 before it was done, and Sheriff Beecham told the Oklahoman exactly where it left him. He said, "I'm at my wit's end." Then he said something that defines the entire case. A lot of investigators would love to have as many leads as we do. The problem is they point in so many different directions. The later searchers turned up exactly 2 objects: a pocket knife with no blood and no prints, no DNA, it was clean, and high up in the branches of a pine tree, a white party balloon. That's it. That's what the mountain gave back. But the case wasn't done with Sheriff Beecham, because back at his office, it kept pulling him back into that security footage. He watched it a dozen times. Every trip, every frame, and one clip kept bothering him. Sherilynn walking to the truck, and under her arm, the one facing away from the camera, a sliver of something, a few pixels. So he pulled up the second camera angle, the same time code, zoomed in, toggled back and forth, frame by frame, until he finally took shape. The brown leather briefcase. Told you we'd circle back. He grabbed the inventory report for every item seized from the truck. He went through it line by line. No briefcase. It was never in the truck. That's how the single most important object in this case was discovered. Not on the mountain, in a few pixels of low-resolution footage. And the phone records held one more surprise. Bobby's BlackBerry was recovered from the truck, dead, but when investigators pulled the carrier logs, there was activity after October 8th. October 12th, 6 p.m., an entry. 8 p.m., an incoming call. Another at 8:50. October 13th, 5:27 p.m., one final incoming call. This was 4 and 5 days after the family went silent. While the phone was supposedly locked inside an abandoned truck, the logs show something. Now, there are 3 explanations, and I'll give you all of them. 1, it's a technical artifact. Phones roaming between towers can generate log entries that look like activity. 2, the dog, Maisie, alone in the truck for days, pawing at the BlackBerry. It sounds absurd until you remember that the phones had old track wheels, so maybe. 3, someone had the phone and put it back. The carrier records that could settle this have never been made public, so make what you will of that. Meanwhile, a year after the disappearance, the case goes national. Investigation Discovery's Disappeared devotes a full episode, December 2010. Now, on that broadcast, Bobby's mother, Starlet, says something that pours gasoline on the internet. Sherilynn knew things about witchcraft. Once she told me she cast demons out of someone. Sherilynn believed her power came from a gold piece in her cheek. The occult machine now has everything it needs. And we're going to deal with that machine in a few minutes. For the people who actually loved this family, those years look different. August 1st, 2010, Madyson turns 7 in absentia. Nikki, Starlet, and Connie, they mark it by raising money for independent searches, restaurant nights, community drives, a Facebook group called Find the Jamisons that Nikki keeps alive, and Nikki keeps going up that mountain. March 2011, she brings 2 private investigators. She reported that shots were fired near them, warning shots. On another trip, she and a companion found half a dozen trucks with Texas plates. They were lined up, they were blocking the clearing's only exit road, and then from the tree line, they heard male laughter, voices they could hear but they couldn't see. 3 gunshots, then they left. That's Nikki's account. Make of it what you will, but she kept going back. The sheriff didn't get that option. April 2011, Israel Beecham resigns. 2 years into the case, he swore he'd finish. In November 2013, Latimer County is on its 3rd sheriff in 4 years. Every transition, a new desk, a new inbox, an old case sliding further down the pile. In 2012, the lake house is sold. 4 years, no arrests, no remains, no answers. By the fall of 2013, the Jamison family fully passed into legend, basically a campfire story told on a Facebook page. Then on November 16th, 2013, a family named the Grahams drives up Panola Mountain to scout locations for their deer stands, and the legend ends. November 16th, 2013, a bright, sunny Saturday, 4 years, 1 month, and 8 days after the Jamisons vanished. A man named Tim Graham drives his family up Panola Mountain, his wife, his daughter Jessica, his nephew Lane, and yes, coincidentally, Tim's wife, also named Sherilynn. The Grahams hunted on this mountain for 13 years. Their deer camp is on a private tract of woodland. It's in the place the locals called Smokestack Hollow. Today, they're scouting spots for the deer stand. Tim's excited. He's introducing the kids to hunting this season. 5 minutes off the trail, Tim spots a streak of white on the tree line. He tells the kids it's a buck rub. It's a mark that deer leave when they scrape the velvet off their antlers. They walk towards it, and when they get there, it's not a rub. It isn't even a tree. It's a single blade of grass catching the sunlight at the perfect angle. It's a trick of the light. And that's when Tim looks down. At his feet, half under the leaves, is something that looks like a dead turtle, a dirty, bleached dome. He picks it up, a skull. Tim's wife, Sherilynn, walks over, looks at the thing in his hands. Is that human? He sets it back down exactly where he found it, and as his wife turns away, her eyes land on something else. 15 yards away, another one. This skull is lying face up next to a log. It's smaller than the first, and it's missing its 2 front teeth. Sherilynn and Graham had seen those missing posters at work for years. The little girl from Eufaula making a goofy face, showing the gap where her front baby teeth used to be, standing in those woods. One thought filled her mind now. Please don't let this be that little girl. Tim says what any father would say. Let's get out of here. And on that walk out, heading back towards the trail, Tim spots a third skull about 150 yards from the road. He picks it up, and this one has a hole in it. That hole. In a few minutes, it's going to become the single most contested object in this entire case. The Grahams call it in, and then they wait. They're locked inside their utility vehicle as the sun goes down. Tim keeps threatening to just drive home. They don't. They know how it would look. Finally, headlights. An investigator named Tim Turner arrives with what the Grahams describe as an army of cruisers and county vehicles. That night, the Latimer County Sheriff's Office announces it. Skeletal remains, 3 bodies, roughly 2.8 miles from where the Jamisons' truck was found. The sheriff, now a man named Jesse James, the 3rd sheriff of Latimer County since the family vanished, he tells reporters that the case file is, quote, very, very thick. The OSBI's Gary Perkinson is careful. He says there was nothing at the scene to indicate the identities of the deceased. Nothing to, quote, determine a cause or manner of death. The official incident report comes November 27th. 3 skulls, bones, bone fragments, bits of clothing in, quote, an extremely remote area 9 miles south of Kinta. And one more item. When the family pressed for information, an OSBI agent told Sherilynn's mother a child's shoe was found with the remains. Connie asked what color it was, because Madyson's favorite color was pink. She always wore pink. Then she said something that hangs over everything. I think law enforcement knows more than they're saying. They've implied that over the years. Curious. The day after the discovery, Nikki Schnell posted to the Find the Jamisons group. It's with a broken heart that I report, 1 minute, I'm sobbing, the next, I'm in a fog. I was sure Madyson was alive out there somewhere. I was wrong. Now here's where the location. It's tragic. The remains were found 150 yards from a road. Not a trail, the road. The only road. The same one that connects the well pad where their truck sat to every other property on that mountain. Tim Graham said it over and over. He couldn't understand how 3 people failed to find a road that was 150 yards away. And remember the search? Sheriff Woodruff, who was on that mountain as a deputy, said years later, quote, they were in a kind of ditch area and we both were almost sure we searched that area, but they could have died somewhere else and been dragged there. The men who ran the search were almost sure that they searched the spot where the family lay. Now think about that. The remains were sent to the University of Texas for a specialized DNA analysis. The OSBI took over the case, and the family waited 9 more months. June 6, 2014, the autopsies are complete. July 3, 2014, the medical examiner's office makes it official. Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson. They've been on the mountain the whole time, or at least that's where they ended up. And the cause of death? Well, Dr. Joshua Lanter, working with forensic anthropologists, issued his findings. Undetermined due to incomplete skeletal remains. Incomplete is the right word. For one of the adults, everything recovered. A cranium, 2 femurs, part of an arm. It all added up to about 2% of a human skeleton. For Madyson, only the top of her skull was ever found. The report notes post-mortem animal damage. They estimate the remains had been there somewhere between 18 months and 5 years. Now look at that range. 5 years covers the day they vanished. 18 months doesn't. Even the timeline is undetermined. No trauma could be identified, and because of what was missing, no trauma could be ruled out. Nothing could be ruled out, really. Injury, disease, nothing. 4 years of searching, 9 months of forensics, the most advanced DNA science in the country, and the official answer to what killed the Jamison family is I don't know. The medical examiner could say who they were, he couldn't say what happened to them. Earlier, I told you the family was looking at 2 pieces of land, a couple of 40-acre plots, and I promised we'd circle back. That time is now. They got lost before they even parked, confused, disoriented, and ultimately doomed. It's everywhere. Here's the story the internet's told for 17 years. The Jamisons drove to the wrong location. They got lost before they even parked, confused, disoriented. They were ultimately doomed. It's everywhere. Now here's what the actual reporting from October 2009 says. When investigators first found the truck, it wasn't sitting where the map in the truck says the land was. So their first read was exactly that, a lost family. Then they talked to the sellers and learned that the family was actually considering 2 parcels. The truck was actually parked at the second one. So they weren't lost, they weren't at the wrong place. They were at the other property on their list. The wrong location story died in October 2009, and the internet's been resurrecting it ever since. Let me show you how it works. Take the truck. Half the videos out there say it was found unlocked, the other half say locked. Here's the answer. Both are true. The doors were locked and the keys were in the ignition. Both details, same truck, same reports, and 17 years of retellings, each grabbed one and dropped the other. Take the money. Every video says $32,000, but go back to October 2009 and no printed source has a number. Every paper says the same word, substantial. The $32,000 figure doesn't enter print until May 2010. That's 7 months later. The number's real, but watch how a case detail is born months after the fact and then gets retold as if it was known on day one. And the little stuff, it mutates everywhere you look. The hunter becomes hunters on dirt bikes. October 17th becomes October 16th. 30 miles becomes an hour's drive. The protective order moves from May to April. The father barely missed Bobby with his car in the court petition, but in the retellings, he hit him. Even the dog can't keep her name. Maisie, Macy, Massey. Pick a spelling, somebody's published it. None of these alone changes the case. Together, they tell you the story you've heard is a photocopy of a photocopy. Now the bigger ones. You'll find comments on every Jamison video swearing that there's a mystery man in the security footage, a figure in a gray shirt. Where did that come from? Well, I traced it. July 28th, 2012, Nikki Shenold, another freezing of the footage, frame by frame, posted that she believes she saw a second man in a brown shirt. That's the origin. One devoted friend's analysis of low-resolution video. Her brown shirt turned into gray somewhere along the lines of the retellings. And remember, only a few minutes of that footage was ever released to the public. Investigators who watched all of it described 2 people loading the truck, Bobby and Sherilynn. That's it. And remember the part about the spirits, demons on the roof, the special bullets? Here's something almost nobody knows about how that story reached the public. Pastor Gary Brandon never gave an interview. Not one. Never. The FBI interviewed him by phone for an internal case profile. The profile was shared with local law enforcement, and then it leaked to the media. The most famous occult material in this entire case entered the world through a leaked summary of a phone call. The man at the center of it all has never publicly confirmed, denied, or commented. He was scheduled to appear on the Discovery Show and dropped out right before filming. He's been silent ever since. Which brings us to the hole in the skull. I told you to hold on to it. Here's every version on the record. Version 1, Tim Graham, the hunter who found the remains, he told reporters one of the skulls had a hole in it. An OSBI agent immediately suggested scavengers, coyotes. Graham's answer made him famous. Quote, "Ain't no coyote did that." Years later, he went further. He said, "I know what a bullet hole is. This was a bullet hole. It was frayed and had jagged edges. The bullet had come from the inside out the top of the head. It wasn't an entrance, it was an exit hole." Version 2, the autopsy. Dr. Lanter's reports, all 3 of them use the same language. Post-mortem carnivore damage and rodent damage is noted to the cranium. Animal damage after death. No gunshot findings in any report. Version 3, Sheriff Beecham. That's the man who ran the search. In a 2020 podcast interview on tape, the former sheriff said at least one of the skulls had a hole in the back of it, a bullet hole. He said the parents were killed, 100%. And what he said about the OSBI and the FBI's conclusions, I can't repeat on this platform. Version 4, Sheriff Woodruff. the current sheriff. He was asked about the hole years later. He said there was a hole, and from what I remember, they believed it was left by a hog or something. Wild hogs. A bullet, a coyote, a rodent, a hog. 4 explanations from the finder, the examiner, and 2 sheriffs, men who stood on the same mountain and read the same reports, and questions about how the remains were arranged. One version, published nationally, says that the bodies lay side by side, face down in the dirt. The Grahams recalled the skulls forming a perfect triangle. It's curious. And the autopsy? For one of the adults, the recovered remains added up to 2% of the skeleton. You can't lay 2% of a person side by side, so somebody's version isn't just wrong, it's impossible. And that famous last photo of Madyson, you'll read that she's wearing a red hooded jacket. It's proof, supposedly, that something doesn't add up. I checked the photo against the case record. She's there in a t-shirt. It's light colored, blue jeans. On an 86-degree afternoon, exactly what you'd expect. The red jacket is not there. But wait, there's more. There's always more. A psychic who claims the coordinates sit on a cursed line of tragedy along the 35th parallel. The missing 411 crowd who fold this case into the Sasquatch wars of the nearby Kimchi Mountains. Anonymous tipsters who fed Nikki Schonold fabricated stories. A hit list. A kidnapping ring. Strangers, the author of the definitive book on this case called Shifty Saboteurs. And remember Uncle Jack, Bob Sr.'s brother? The internet decided he did it. He claimed they said he hid the money in coal pits. His daughter Dana told an author that she'd find her father, a man in his 70s, weeping at his computer, reading stranger after stranger accuse him of murdering his own family. She said those years aged him a decade. That's what the myth machine does. It doesn't just get the facts wrong. It grinds up the living. I promised you the record, and the record has a crack that nobody in it can close. The 2 biggest newspapers in the state reported 2 different dates for the last day anybody saw this family alive, October 8th and October 9th. 17 years later, that's still unresolved. That's the Jamisons case. And if you want to know what really happened to them, follow the money. Follow the money. That's not my line. That's the advice Sheriff Beecham gave on tape in 2020. So let's take him up on it. Every dollar all the way down, starting with the question this case has never answered. Where did the $32,000 come from? The answer is sitting in a courthouse in Oklahoma City. Remember that car accident from the very start of this story? November 2003? The one that broke Bobby's back? Well, on May 3rd, 2005, Bobby filed suit over that wreck. 3 defendants. And on March 28, 2007, the case was dismissed with prejudice. Dismissed with prejudice means the case is over. It's permanently over. It can never be filed again. And that's what you agree to when somebody writes you a check. The docket doesn't show the amount. Settlements like this are private. But May 2010, Bobby's mother, Starlet, gave investigators the number. $64,000, split 2 ways, $32,000 for Bobby, $32,000 for Sherilynn. And get this, that's the same May 2010 reporting where the $32,000 figure first entered print. The number and its explanation arrived together side by side. The retellings kept the number and just dropped the explanation. But hold on, why is this married couple splitting a settlement 2 ways? We'll get there. First, a wrinkle. Sherilynn's mother, Connie, said she didn't know of any settlement that could explain the cash. So the 2 grandmothers had 2 different pictures of the family's finances. The paper trail sides with Starlet. A lawsuit ends exactly the way the settlement ends. But again, why split the money? Well, for that, you need the one person who lived inside the house, Colton, Sherilynn's son. We already know that the marriage was in trouble. Colton says by 2009, his parents were yelling about divorce daily. And at some point, they separated their money. He remembered the number as, quote, around 60 grand each. He was 13 years old at the time. The record says 64,000 total. His memory of the amount may be off. His memory of what happened to it is the part that matters here. Because according to Colton, Bobby hid his share inside the truck in case Sherilynn kicked him out. Curious. If Colton's right, the famous $32,000 wasn't travel money, and it wasn't necessarily brought along to buy land. It may have lived in the truck. It would have been in the truck on any day you picked. And what about Sherilynn's half? One night, she came into Colton's room and had him stash her money under his mattress. It stayed there about a week, then she took it back while he was at school. He never learned why. So where was her $32,000 on the morning the family drove away? Well, Sheriff Beecham came to believe he knew. He said that brown briefcase, the one on the security footage, the one that never came down the mountain, held Cheryl's half of the settlement. And likely one more thing, her .22 caliber pistol. the one she carried at all times everywhere she went. Under Sheriff Bond said someone up there knew that they had money on them in Sherilynn's bag. And if you follow the money far enough, it stops being about a truck and starts becoming about a will. Remember earlier I told you Bob Sr. rewrote his will on October 27th, 2008, and that we'd circle back to it? This is that moment. Context first. 1 month before he signed it, September 24th, 2008, Bob Sr. filed for divorce from Starlet. So this will was written mid-divorce. It cut out his son Bobby, it cut out his soon-to-be ex-wife Starlet, and left everything to one person, a 5-year-old girl, Madyson. Article 4 of the will names a trustee, someone to manage the estate for her until she turns 21. Bobby's uncle, Jack Jamison. Yeah, that Jack. The man you just watched the internet put on trial. This is the document that the trial was built on. And if Madyson doesn't survive her grandfather, the will says the quote, residue of the estate goes back to Jack and to another of Bob Sr.'s brothers, Amos Jamison. Then comes Article 5. And I'm going to read it to you word for word because almost nobody ever quotes it straight. Quote, in the event that any beneficiary hereof and I both shall die in a common accident or disaster or under such circumstances as makes it impossible or difficult to determine who died first, then it shall be conclusively deemed that such beneficiary did not survive me. That's called a simultaneous death clause. And to be fair, these are normal. They exist to override state survivorship rules. So an estate doesn't get dragged through 2 probates when people die together. Husbands and wives use them all the time. But an author on this case put the exact clause in front of a probate attorney who suggested married couples use such clauses because they die together a surprising amount of time. But having a simultaneous death clause between an old man and a young child is bizarre on its face. I failed to see the utility. The dates start stacking. August 17th, 2009, Bob Sr.'s divorce from Starlet becomes final. 7 weeks later, the family vanishes. December 10th, 2009, Bob Sr. dies. Congestive heart failure. His son, his daughter-in-law, his granddaughter, all are still missing, and the estate goes to probate. December 16th, 2009, Starlet files a will from 2004, an order will that left the estate to a marital trust. 2 days later, December 18th, Jack files the 2008 will, so dueling wills. Court papers estimate the estate at just over $498,000, and that's not counting the real estate and personal property. February 2010, Starlet subpoenas Jack's financial records. Jack moves to quash, then moves to dismiss her challenge altogether. It's a full-blown probate war over the estate of a missing 6-year-old girl. March 4th, 2010, the court admits the 2008 will, and then the part the accusation always leaves out. Jack and Amos, the 2 men named in that will, waive their appointments. Starlet, the woman the will cut out, is appointed the administrator. Now, 3 weeks later, March 26, 2010, the family signs what the docket calls a global family settlement agreement. Jack and Amos take $90,000 each and step away. Starlet takes control of the estate. Now, let me be clear about something. Nobody in that courtroom was accused of a crime. Not then and not since. Families fight over estates every day in this country. That's what probate court is for. The rest of the money trail plays out on paper. June 13th, 2012, the Eufaula Lake House is sold. Starlet signs a deed as, quote, acting guardian of the family's estate. June 20th, 2013, the estate sells a commercial property in Oklahoma City. It's leased to a rental car company for $215,000. And the $32,000 from the truck, when the case finally allowed it, the money was returned to Starlet, which means every dollar in the story is accounted for, every stack except one. Sherilynn's $32,000, the half that Sheriff Beecham believed rode up the mountain in a brown briefcase sitting next to a .22 caliber pistol. Neither one has ever been found. In May 2010, Sheriff Beecham said something that could serve as this case's epitaph. He said, normally you can go through an investigation and one by one start to eliminate certain scenarios. We haven't been able to do that in this case. With this family, everything seems possible. And he listed the possibilities for the record: robbery, revenge, a bad drug deal, even a professional hit. So that's how we're going to end this. Not with my theory, just the open doors and who's standing in each one. Door number 1, somebody stopped them. Now, Beecham again, 2010, said, based on how the truck was parked and what was found inside the truck, I think they were forced to stop and got out of the truck to meet with someone they recognized, and I think they either left willingly or by force. Remember how the truck sat, pinned against 3-foot ridges of mud? Colton looked at the photos and said, I know damn well that my mom wouldn't have let him park somewhere that was inconvenient for her to get out. A blogger who worked the case in the early years reported that a mountain resident saw fresh tire tracks leading away from the Jamisons truck, so possibly a second vehicle. Now, that claim has never appeared in any official record. The family went further. Sherilynn's former sister-in-law wrote that she and Starlet believed that the clearing wasn't the crime scene. The truck was placed there, a decoy. She said Sherilynn carried the purse everywhere. Remember that? She would never leave it behind. And Connie told reporters, quote, there's no way that they just wandered off and got lost. What I truly believe is that they went up there, they saw something they shouldn't, and they were murdered by someone. To her, the truck looked like someone forced them to stop. She said, everyone around here knows that there are lots of evil people up in those mountains. Now, you already heard where Sheriff Beecham landed 10 years later. On that 2020 podcast, he went further than any investigator ever has. He said, quote, I knew within a month or two who done it, but I can't prove it, so it doesn't matter. He never said a name. Hold on to that. Door number 2, robbery revenge. Under Sheriff Bond, who was there from day one, told an author, quote, I went back and forth between MS and robbery a million times. MS being murder-suicide. The man who worked the case for years was evenly split. Bond also confirmed 2 things that nobody else would. Discoveries were made in the case that were never revealed to the public. And the neighbor, the man I've been calling DC, was interviewed as a suspect several times. Then there's the lodger. A handyman stayed with the family in 2009 until Sherilynn threw him out at gunpoint. Sheriff Beecham said he had a barrel stuck in his ear by Sherilynn. At first you think, great, here's someone with a motive. But the FBI cleared him. FYI, he's since died. Colton still believes he was involved, a revenge scenario. That's a grieving son's theory about a man the FBI cleared. Both of those things are true. And Reed Hogan, the Army veteran turned deputy, you met him on day 1 of the search, he held something back for over a decade. What he felt at the scene. He said the truck looked like someone had walked them out at gunpoint. He also claims he smelled meth cooking somewhere in the mountain air. He told the sheriff, these guys are cooking dope. The theory was the family drove up the wrong road at the wrong time and saw an operation they weren't supposed to see, but run the counterweights. Bond rejected the drug deal theory. And you know from what the evidence said about this family and drugs, there's nothing. It said nothing. A Wilburton local named Mona talked about the town's read of the situation. She said, it's like someone took their truck and laid it down on this pad and then dropped them and left them. And then she said people go missing in those mountains so often, no one even bats an eye anymore. Door number 3, this one requires me to be more careful than anything else in this episode. So listen to how I say this, not just what I say. There was a man named Kevin Joe Sweat. These are facts. They were adjudicated. They're on the record. In 2008, he murdered 2 little girls, Taylor Placker and Skylar Whitaker, on a dirt road outside Whitaker, Oklahoma. In 2011, he murdered his fiancée Ashley Taylor and burned her remains on the family's property. He confessed. He said he shot the girls because he saw, quote, 2 monsters. He pleaded guilty to all 3 murders. 3 consecutive life sentences, no parole, and at his sentencing, he attacked his lawyer with a razor blade. In October 2009, when the Jamisons drove up that mountain, Kevin Sweat was a free man. Nobody connected him to anything yet. In fact, that same year, state troopers found a gun case in his car. Prosecutors later linked it to the Willika murder weapon. Nobody knew. Now here's what 2 private citizens noticed years later. Nikki Shenold, Sherilynn's best friend, and Michael Taylor, Ashley's father. A man who knew Sweat for years. Everything that follows is their account, nobody else's. Sweat's family, or a close friend's family, owned the land on Panola Mountain. He 4-wheeled up there constantly. At the clearing where the Jamisons' truck was found, there was an old junked vehicle covered in graffiti. Nikki came to believe that Sherilynn spray painted over the darker messages with religious ones in the hours before the family vanished. And Michael Taylor remembered something. Sweat once told him about an abandoned truck on that mountain, one he used for target practice, and one day Sweat was furious. Michael Taylor remembered something. Sweat once told him about an abandoned truck on that mountain. He used it for target practice. And one day, Sweat was furious because somebody had, quote, defaced his truck. Michael said he didn't think anything of it at the time, but it all came rushing back. Could it be a coincidence? There's more. Sweat's shooting quarry was in a town called Marble City. It's the same town an anonymous poster once claimed the Jamisons were buried there. And Sweat got Ashley a cat. He named it Stormy. He told Michael that the name came from the missing little girl, Madyson Stormy Jamison. Nikki and Michael became, in their own words, 99% sure that Sweat was the second figure that they perceived in the Jamisons' security footage. The brown shirt from earlier, this is where that road ends. And now for the other side of the story. Kevin Sweat has never been charged in the Jamison case. He's never been named by the OSBI, the FBI, or the Latimer County Sheriff's Office. No physical evidence connecting him has ever been disclosed. The OSBI's director said that before 2011, they had no information linking Sweat to any of it, not even to Walika. What you just heard is speculation of two people who knew these cases from the inside and nothing more. Now, door number 4, the one families kind of whisper about, murder-suicide aspect. Investigators never ruled it out. You heard bond was evenly split. The case for it, you already know, a marriage in trouble, an 11-page letter. The case against it sits at Smokestack Hollow. No weapon was ever found at the scene. Sherilynn's .22 caliber has never surfaced anywhere. Connie said neither Bobby nor Sherilynn would ever dream of harming Madyson. An author asked Colton about it, her son. He said, honestly, it's not impossible. Door number 5, the official one. The author of the definitive book of this case wrote down the strangest fact of all. Virtually all local law enforcement believes foul play was involved, while the state and the federal agencies maintain that they just got lost and died from exposure. Curious, right? When the remains were identified, the FBI asked Uncle Jack for a DNA sample, the closest living male relative. And while he was there, they told him the conclusion. The family most likely got lost and died from exposure. And Jack believed them. His daughter Dana was asked if she believed it. She said, not really. Somebody did something to them. He was always kind of gullible, so maybe somebody lured him there. The current sheriff, Adam Woodruff, confirmed the ruling to an author. He said accidental, probably exposure. And then the current sheriff said this about the former one. I'm not saying Israel's wrong, because he could be right. A part of me agrees with what he's saying, a part of me doesn't. If you're working a case for that long, you hate for it to be just an accident. You heard all about the exposure case earlier. It's real, it's strong, but Sheriff Beecham could never get past one thing: Bobby's spine. After years of walking the terrain himself, he couldn't understand how a man with a broken down back and a 6-year-old in tow covered enough ground to disappear. To him, it kind of defied logic. Door number 6, they walked away. A blogger claimed in 2012 there was overwhelming evidence the Jamisons staged their own disappearance. A former deputy wrote, I do not feel like they are in danger or left unwillingly. Here's what that theory has to answer for. The Jamisons owned 2 timeshares in Mexico and several more across the United States. After October 8th, 2009, not one of them was ever used again. And on November 16th, 2013, the door closed itself. One more voice, Connie. The anonymous tipsters you met earlier, the saboteurs, their stories reached her too. For years, she cited the possibility that her daughter was on a cult's hit list, but her bedrock never moved. In 2010, before the remains were found, she said, I think somebody killed them and they're still up there. On that second part, she was right. And before I close the last door, 2 more names. Tommy Estep, July 7th, 2013, last seen in Eufaula during a family weekend at the lake. That September, hunters found his truck in the woods near Holdenville. It was locked. His license, his money, his keys, it was all inside. They searched the area, cadaver dogs, nothing. April 8th, 2017, turkey hunters found his remains, 3/4 of a mile from where the truck sat. Cause of death, undetermined. The case is still open. And Peggy McGuire, 28 years old, last seen dropping her son off at school outside Eufaula, November 16th, 2015. 2 years to the day after the Grahams walked into the Smokestack Hollow, she's never been found. I'm not telling you these cases are connected. No agencies ever connected them. I'm telling you they happened in the same small corner of Oklahoma. The last door is the first one this story ever opened. May 2010, Sheriff Beecham on the record said, a man who lived a 1/4 mile from where the pickup was found is the last known person to see the family. He was questioned. Beecham said, the man claimed he never saw the family after that, nor did he see anyone else go up or come down. Curious. October 8th, 2009, a mother, a father, and a little girl loaded a truck on camera and drove into the San Bois Mountains. 9 days later, their truck was found locked with the keys inside. 4 years later, a hunting family found them, 2.8 miles away, 150 yards from the road. No cause of death, no manner of death, no arrests, no suspects ever named. Madyson Stormy Jamison would be 22 years old today. If you know something, the Latimer County Sheriff's Office and the OSBI are still listening. I'm John Genoa. This is America's Strangest History. Thanks for watching.